You're being detained for suspicious activity. Step out of the vehicle!
It's a beautiful Thursday afternoon. The sun is shining, birds are singing, and Sarah Martinez is driving home from the grocery store, her backseat full of bread, milk, eggs, just normal Thursday afternoon things. She sees flashing lights in her rearview mirror. Her heart skips a beat, like it does for all of us when we see those lights. But she's not worried. She hasn't done anything wrong. She's not speeding. She's not texting. Her car is legal. Her insurance is paid. Everything is in order. She pulls over on Riverside Avenue, a quiet street in her small Colorado town, and waits. What Sarah doesn't know is that the next hour is about to change everything. Not just for her, but for an entire police department, for a corrupt officer who thought he was untouchable, and for a system that had been failing people for 7 long years. Before we dive in, I need to ask you something. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Because stories like this, they need to be heard. They need to be shared. And trust me when I say, you will not believe where this goes. Officer Marcus Hayes steps out of his patrol car. He's been on the force for 12 years. 12 years of traffic stops, 12 years of arrests, 12 years of wearing that badge like it's a shield that protects him from consequences. Sarah has her license and registration ready. Her husband, James, a U.S. Marshal with 15 years of experience, taught her to always be prepared, always be calm, always know your rights. She rolls down her window halfway and waits. Hayes approaches the car, but he doesn't ask for her documents. Not right away. Instead, he just stares. He looks at Sarah's face. He looks at her medical scrubs. She's a dental hygienist just finishing a shift. He peers into her back seat at those grocery bags sitting there, perfectly innocent. 10 full seconds of just staring. Sarah can feel her heartbeat in her throat, but she keeps her voice steady. "Officer, why did you pull me over?" Hayes looks at her, and this is what he says. "Your car matches the description of a vehicle involved in a theft 2 streets over." Here's the thing, though. There was no theft, not 2 streets over. Not anywhere within 3 miles of that spot. Not that day, not that week. It was a lie. A complete fabrication. Sarah stays calm. She remembers what James told her. Stay calm, be polite, don't give them a reason, and record everything if possible. Her phone is sitting in the cup holder. She reaches for it slowly, announcing what she's doing out loud so there's no confusion. "I'd like to record this interaction." "Don't move!" Hayes' voice cuts through the air like a whip. His hand moves toward his belt. Sarah freezes, her hand still extended toward the phone. "I just want to record this, officer. That's my legal right in Colorado. Step out of the vehicle." "Why? What did I?" "You're being detained for suspicious activity. Step out now." If you've ever felt powerless, if you've ever been in a situation where someone with authority made you feel small, made you feel like your rights didn't matter, type "I understand" in the comments, because what happens next is going to make your blood boil. Sarah steps out of the car. She's done nothing wrong. She's committed no crime. She's just a woman driving home from buying groceries in her own neighborhood. Hayes tells her to turn around and put her hands on the vehicle. She complies. The handcuffs go on, and they go on tight. So tight that the metal immediately starts cutting into her skin. Sarah gasps at the pain, but Hayes doesn't loosen them. He doesn't adjust them. He just leaves them digging into her wrists like she's some dangerous criminal instead of a dental hygienist with a spotless record. A second officer arrives. His name is Ryan Cooper. He's only been on the force for 2 years, and he's never received a single complaint. He stands by his patrol car watching Hayes handle the situation. He looks uncomfortable. That discomfort? It's going to matter later. Hayes starts going through Sarah's purse without asking permission. He opens her wallet. He looks at her photos. He reads through everything like he's searching for buried treasure. He finds her concealed carry permit, completely legal, properly filed, everything by the book. Then he finds James's business card, the one that identifies him as a U.S. Marshal. You'd think finding out that this woman's husband is a federal law enforcement officer would make Hayes pause, right? You'd think he'd realize he might want to be extra careful about following proper procedure. But his face doesn't show apology. It shows anger. "What am I being detained for?" Sarah asks again. Hayes doesn't answer. Instead, he walks to her car and starts searching it. No warrant, no permission, no probable cause. Nothing. He opens the glove compartment. He looks under the seats. He takes out every single grocery bag and starts pulling out items one by one, setting them on the street like they're evidence. Bread, milk, tomatoes, chicken, all sitting there on the asphalt. A neighbor named Maria Chen is walking her dog across the street. She stops. She watches. Something about this doesn't feel right to her, so she pulls out her phone and starts recording. Hayes is too focused on the car to notice. Cooper, the backup officer, finally speaks up. "What exactly are we looking for here?" Hayes barely glances at him. "Secure the perimeter." Secure the perimeter? There is no perimeter. This is a grocery store traffic stop on a residential street. But Cooper doesn't push back. He's young. Hayes is a senior officer. He doesn't know what to do. 12 minutes. Hayes searches that car for 12 full minutes while Sarah stands on the sidewalk in handcuffs, so tight they're cutting into her flesh. And you know what he finds? Nothing. No drugs. No weapons. No stolen property. No contraband of any kind. Just groceries. Some napkins in the glove compartment. An ice scraper. And a small toy that Sarah's niece left behind during a visit last month. 12 minutes of illegal searching. 12 minutes of a woman bleeding on the sidewalk. 12 minutes of violating every constitutional right that's supposed to protect us from exactly this kind of abuse. Sarah asks 3 more times what she's being charged with. Hayes ignores her. All 3 times. If you've ever dealt with someone who abused their power, whether it's a boss, a cop, a teacher, anyone, type "experienced" in the comments. Because you know exactly how Sarah feels right now. That helpless anger. That burning frustration of knowing you're being wronged, but being unable to stop it in the moment. Hayes walks back to Sarah. He stands close. Too close. Invading her personal space in that way that's meant to intimidate. "Where do you really live?" Sarah takes a breath. 4 blocks from here. "I just told you, I came from the grocery store." "How can you afford to live in this neighborhood?" That question. Right there. That's the question that reveals everything about why Sarah was really pulled over. See, Sarah lives in a nice middle-class neighborhood. Nothing fancy, nothing extravagant, just a decent area with well-maintained homes. She and James saved for 6 years to buy their house. They worked hard, they budgeted, they sacrificed. But Hayes looks at Sarah, a black woman in a decent car in a nice neighborhood, and he makes assumptions. He makes assumptions about who belongs there and who doesn't. Sarah doesn't answer the question about affording her neighborhood. She doesn't have to. It's none of his business, and it has absolutely nothing to do with any legitimate traffic stop. "Is this car really yours?" "Yes." "You sure about that?" "Yes." "Where'd you get the money to buy it?" The car is a 4-year-old Honda Accord. It's not a luxury vehicle, it's not flashy. It costs less than most of the pickup trucks parked in driveways around the neighborhood. But to Hayes, a black woman driving something nice is automatically suspicious. Maria, the neighbor who's been recording, walks a little closer. "Excuse me, is she okay? What's happening here?" Hayes whips around. "Back up right now, or you'll be arrested for interfering with police business." Maria backs up, but she keeps recording. Hayes runs Sarah's information through his system. Everything comes back clean. No warrants, no violations, no unpaid tickets. Her record is absolutely spotless except for one speeding ticket from 2011 that she paid in full the same week. A clean record should have ended this. Hayes should have removed the handcuffs, mumbled an apology about the mistaken vehicle description, and sent her on her way. But he doesn't do that. Instead, he radios for a female officer to come perform a pat-down search of Sarah's body. He has no legal reason for this, none whatsoever. Sarah, still bleeding from the handcuffs cutting into her wrists, finally raises her voice. "I do not consent to any search. I have broken no laws. I want a supervisor here immediately." Hayes looks at her with this little smirk. Requesting a supervisor just makes you look more suspicious, you know. This is manipulation, pure and simple. He's trying to make her doubt herself, trying to make her think that knowing her rights is somehow proof of guilt. But here's the truth. Any citizen has the right to request a supervisor during a police interaction. It doesn't indicate guilt. It indicates someone who understands the law. Cooper shifts his weight uncomfortably. Later, much later, he'll testify that he knew this stop had gone way too far. But in the moment, he doesn't know how to challenge a senior officer without creating a huge conflict. 18 minutes later, a female officer arrives. Her name is Detective Lisa Park. She asks Hayes what's going on. Hayes, without missing a beat, says that Sarah was driving erratically and became aggressive during the stop. Both statements are complete lies. Park looks at Sarah, then at Hayes, then at the car with groceries scattered on the street. You can see it on her face. Something doesn't add up. "Are you okay?" she asks Sarah directly. Sarah holds up her wrists. The handcuffs have broken the skin. Small drops of blood are visible on her left wrist. Park's expression changes completely. "Why are the handcuffs that tight?" "She was resisting," Hayes says quickly. Another lie. Maria's video, still recording from across the street, shows Sarah complying with every single command. Park makes a decision right there. "I'm not searching her. There's no probable cause for any of this." Hayes starts to argue, but Park cuts him off. "This stop ends now." She removes the handcuffs herself. Sarah's wrists are bruised, cut, swollen. The marks will last for 3 weeks. Park takes photos with her personal phone, which is actually against department protocol, but these photos will become crucial evidence later. Hayes is furious. You can see it in his body language, in the set of his jaw. "You're free to go," he tells Sarah. But the way he says it sounds like a threat, not a release. He doesn't help her pick up the groceries from the street. He doesn't apologize. He just gets in his car and drives away. Cooper helps Sarah gather her scattered groceries. He apologizes quietly. "I should have stepped in sooner." Sarah doesn't respond. She's shaking from adrenaline, from anger, from fear, from the violation of having her rights trampled for no reason except the color of her skin. Park hands Sarah her card. "File a complaint. Please, this isn't..." She pauses, choosing her words carefully. "This isn't the first time I've seen Officer Hayes go too far." She can't say more than that, but the message is crystal clear. Sarah drives home. She puts the groceries away with trembling hands, and she sits down at her kitchen table, trying to process what just happened. When James comes home 2 hours later, she tells him everything. James Martinez has been a U.S. Marshal for 15 years. He's seen corruption. He's seen racist policing. He's testified in federal cases about both. But hearing that it happened to his wife, in their neighborhood, for no reason except driving while black, makes him angrier than Sarah has ever seen him. James doesn't yell, he doesn't rant, he gets quiet. And somehow, that's worse. He looks at Sarah's wrists. He takes photos. He asks her to write down everything she remembers while it's still fresh in her mind. Then James makes phone calls. He calls the police department and files a formal complaint. He calls a lawyer he knows who specializes in civil rights cases. He calls Maria and asks for the video footage. He calls Detective Park and thanks her for the photos she took. The next day, Sarah and James meet with attorney Rebecca Stone. Stone has won 4 major cases against police departments in 3 different states. She's the lawyer cops fear because she doesn't settle cheap and she doesn't back down. She looks at the photos of Sarah's wrists. She watches Maria's video. She listens to every detail of the story. When Sarah finishes talking, Stone says one word: lawsuit. Have you subscribed yet? Because what happens next, the investigation that follows, uncovers something that nobody expected. Something that proves this wasn't just one bad stop. This was a pattern, a system. Years of abuse hiding in plain sight. 3 weeks later, Rebecca Stone files a federal civil rights lawsuit against Officer Marcus Hayes and the entire police department. The lawsuit claims false arrest, illegal search, excessive force, and racial profiling. The amount requested? $8 million. The police department's first response is as predictable as sunrise. They defend Hayes. They claim he followed proper procedure. They suggest that maybe Sarah misunderstood what happened. Maybe she misremembered the details in her stress and confusion. They offer to settle for $20,000 and an apology letter. Stone doesn't even consider it. She wants discovery. That's the legal process where both sides have to hand over all their documents, all their files, all their records. Stone wants access to Hayes's personnel file. His complaint history, his arrest records, everything. And what discovery reveals, like it shocks everyone except the people who had been paying attention all along. Remember earlier when I said Hayes had been on the force for 12 years? During those 12 years, 17 complaints had been filed against him. 17. And here's the kicker. 15 of those 17 complaints came from Black or Latino drivers. But it gets worse. Out of the 143 arrests Hayes had made over the past 7 years, 111 of them were Black or Latino individuals. Think about that for a second. The town's population is only 18% Black and Latino combined, but 77% of Hayes's arrests were minorities. He was arresting people of color at a rate 6 times higher than white people. The charges he filed most often? Vague ones. Suspicious activity, resisting arrest, failure to comply. The kind of charges that are hard to disprove, easy to justify, and give officers maximum discretion. 31 of his arrests had resulted in dropped charges. When charges get dropped, it usually means the arrest was bad from the start. It means there wasn't enough evidence. It means someone got arrested for no legitimate reason. 31 times. Stone digs deeper. She discovers that Hayes had been investigated once before, 5 years earlier, for allegedly planting evidence during a traffic stop. The investigation was dropped after 2 weeks due to insufficient evidence. The person who filed that complaint was a 22-year-old Latino man named Carlos Reyes. And somehow, mysteriously, Carlos's complaint file had disappeared from the department's records. Just gone. If you're starting to see a pattern here, type "I see it" in the comments. Because this isn't about one bad traffic stop anymore. This is about a system that protected an officer who was clearly violating people's rights over and over and over again. The police department's legal team realizes they have a serious problem. They increase their settlement offer to $200,000. Stone says no. The case goes to depositions. That's where witnesses and defendants have to sit in a conference room and answer questions under oath, with everything being recorded by a court reporter. Hayes has to sit there and explain himself. His attorney coaches him to keep his answers short, to not volunteer information. But some truths are hard to hide when you're under oath and being questioned by someone as skilled as Rebecca Stone. Officer Hayes, why did you pull Ms. Martinez over that day? Her car matched a theft report? Can you provide the report number for that theft? Silence. Officer Hayes? I don't remember the number. Can you describe the stolen vehicle that was reported? It was a silver sedan. There are thousands of silver sedans in this city, Officer Hayes. What specifically about Ms. Martinez's vehicle matched the description. No response. Let me ask a different question. Why did you handcuff Miss Martinez? She was acting suspiciously. What suspicious behavior did she display? She reached for her phone suddenly. Stone plays Maria's video. It clearly shows Sarah moving slowly, announcing what she's doing. Does that look sudden to you, Officer Hayes? The video doesn't show the full interaction. Why did you search Ms. Martinez's vehicle? I had probable cause. What was that probable cause? I smelled marijuana. This is the first time Hayes has ever mentioned smelling marijuana. It's not in his police report from that day. It's not in any of his initial statements. Why isn't the smell of marijuana documented in your report? I forgot to include it. Did you find any marijuana in the vehicle? No. Did you field test anything? No. Did Ms. Martinez show any signs of impairment? No. So you smelled marijuana strongly enough to justify a vehicle search, but not strongly enough to test anything or note it in your report, and you found nothing? Silence. The deposition lasts 4 hours. By the end, Hayes has contradicted himself 6 times and introduced 3 new justifications for his actions that appear nowhere in his original documentation. He's caught, and he knows it. Cooper, the backup officer, also gives a deposition. And here's what makes Cooper different. He tells the truth. He says he saw no reason for the stop to escalate the way it did. He says Sarah complied with every command. He says he never smelled marijuana. He says the handcuffs looked painfully tight from where he was standing. His testimony destroys what's left of Hayes' defense. Detective Park testifies too. She brings the photo she took of Sarah's wrists, and she reveals something explosive. She had filed 2 internal complaints about Hayes' conduct in previous years. Both complaints had been dismissed by the department's Internal Affairs Division without any serious investigation. The police department's lawyers know they're going to lose if this goes to trial. They increase their settlement offer to $1.2 million. Stone takes the offer to Sarah and James. She recommends they decline. She believes they can get more at trial. And more importantly, she believes a trial verdict will force policy changes that a settlement never would. Sarah makes a decision. She's going to trial. This isn't easy. Trials are public. They're stressful. They drag on for months. But Sarah wants the full truth exposed, not just for her, but for everyone Hayes pulled over before her. The trial begins on a cold Monday morning in January. The courtroom is packed. Reporters fill the back rows. Community activists sit in the gallery. And scattered throughout are people who have their own stories about Officer Hayes. People who were pulled over, questioned, searched, humiliated. The prosecution presents Maria's video first. The jury watches Sarah comply with every command. They watch Hayes search her car without cause. They watch her stand on the sidewalk, bleeding, for 30 full minutes. 2 jurors visibly react. One covers her mouth, another shakes his head. Medical experts testify about Sarah's wrist injuries. The cuts became infected and required antibiotics. The bruising was severe. Sarah still has faint scars. A statistical expert testifies about Hayes' arrest patterns. He presents charts and graphs showing the massive racial disparity in Hayes' work compared to other officers in the same department. The numbers are damning, undeniable. Then come the other victims. 5 people who had previously filed complaints about Hayes take the stand. One is a 60-year-old black minister named Reverend Thomas Wright. Hayes pulled him over and questioned him for 20 minutes while the Reverend was rushing to the hospital to visit a dying church member. One is a Latina teacher named Isabella Flores. Hayes stopped her 3 times in 8 months, always near the nice neighborhood where she taught piano lessons to kids. One is a young black college student named Marcus Johnson. Hayes pulled him over for looking suspicious while Marcus was driving his little sister to school. Each story follows the same pattern. Questionable stops. Excessive questioning. Searches without real cause. humiliation, violation of rights. If these patterns sound familiar to you, if this reminds you of stories you've heard in your own community, type "same here" in the comments. The defense tries to fight back. They try to paint Sarah as uncooperative. They try to suggest Hayes had legitimate concerns about her behavior. They bring in a use of force expert who claims the handcuffs were applied appropriately, that sometimes they need to be tight for officer safety, but the video evidence is too strong. The witness testimony is too consistent. The pattern is too clear. The trial lasts 9 days. The jury deliberates for 4 hours. When they come back, the forewoman stands up to read the verdict. We find Officer Marcus Hayes guilty of violating Ms. Martinez's civil rights. Sarah closes her eyes. James squeezes her hand. We find the police department guilty of negligent supervision and failure to discipline. The courtroom is silent. You could hear a pin drop. Then comes the damages phase, where the jury decides how much money will make this right. $3 million in compensatory damages. That's for Sarah's physical injuries, her emotional distress, the violation of her constitutional rights. Then the jury adds $3 million more in punitive damages. That's the money meant to punish the department and prevent this from ever happening again. $6 million total. The police department appeals, of course. They claim the amount is excessive. The appeals court upholds $5.8 million of the verdict, slightly reducing the punitive damages but maintaining that the case clearly showed systemic failures that needed to be addressed. 3 days after the verdict, Marcus Hayes is fired. He loses his police certification, meaning he can never work as a law enforcement officer again in that state. 8 months later, he files for bankruptcy. The man who spent 12 years hiding behind a badge, who thought he was untouchable, who violated people's rights over and over because he believed the system would always protect him. He lost everything. But here's what matters more than Hayes losing his job. The police department is forced to implement sweeping policy changes. Every officer now wears a body camera that cannot be turned off during public interactions. All traffic stops are reviewed monthly by a civilian oversight board. Complaints are investigated by an independent agency, not internal affairs. Officers receive mandatory bias training every quarter. These changes don't happen without Sarah's lawsuit, without her refusing to accept $20,000 in an apology, without her being willing to go through a public trial. 17 other people who had complained about Hayes over the years file their own lawsuits. The department settles 12 of them out of court for undisclosed amounts. Sarah uses part of her settlement money to establish a legal defense fund. It helps people who can't afford attorneys when they experience police misconduct. In 3 years, that fund has helped 34 people. 34 people who might have just accepted the injustice because fighting back seemed impossible. Sarah never got an apology from Hayes himself. Even at the end, even after losing everything, he maintained that he did nothing wrong, that he was just doing his job, that he was the real victim of a system that no longer supported police officers. But the evidence told a different story. The evidence showed an officer who used his badge as permission to harass people who didn't look like him. The evidence showed a department that ignored warning signs for years. The evidence showed a system that protected officers over citizens, until one woman who knew her rights and had the resources to fight back forced them to pay attention. Sarah still drives that same Honda Accord. She still lives in the same neighborhood. She still works as a dental hygienist. But now when she sees police lights behind her, something's different. She doesn't wonder if she did something wrong. She knows her rights. She knows what illegal policing looks like. And she knows that staying silent helps nobody. The case became a training example in law schools and police academies across the country. It shows clearly what constitutional violations look like during traffic stops. It demonstrates how departments that ignore complaints create massive legal liability. It proves that juries will hold police accountable when given clear evidence of wrongdoing. James kept Hayes's old business card, the one Hayes found in Sarah's purse that day, pinned to the bulletin board in his home office. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. A reminder that the badge doesn't put anyone above the law, that accountability matters, that his job as a U.S. Marshal is to uphold justice, not to protect people who abuse power. The traffic stop that was supposed to last 5 minutes ended up costing a police department nearly $6 million. It cost an officer his entire career, and it exposed systemic racism that had been operating in plain sight for years. Hayes pulled over the wrong person that Thursday afternoon. He pulled over someone who knew her rights. Someone married to a federal law enforcement officer. Someone who had resources to fight back. Someone who refused to let injustice slide for the sake of convenience. But here's what Sarah talks about whenever she tells the story. She wasn't special. She didn't do anything extraordinary. She simply exercised rights that every single citizen has. The problem is that those rights get violated constantly, and most people don't have the knowledge or resources to fight back. The lawsuit wasn't just about Sarah. It was about every person Hayes had harassed before her. Every person who filed a complaint that got ignored. Every person who got pulled over for driving while black or brown in a nice neighborhood. It was about changing a system that valued protecting officers over protecting citizens. $6 million is a lot of money. But it's also what accountability costs when you ignore the warning signs for years. The police department could have prevented all of this by taking the first complaint seriously, or the 5th, or the 10th. They chose to do nothing. And that choice ended up being very, very expensive. So what do you think? Was $6 million enough? Or should it have been more? Let me know in the comments. And if this story opened your eyes to something you hadn't thought about before, share it. Share it so others can see what happens when people stand up for their rights. Sarah's case didn't fix everything. Police misconduct still happens. Racist policing still exists. But her case proved that fighting back is possible, that the system can work when people push hard enough, and that there are real consequences for violating people's constitutional rights. The next time you see those flashing lights behind you, remember Sarah's story. Know your rights. Stay calm, record when possible. And if something wrong happens, don't stay silent. Because silence is what people like Hayes count on. Silence is how patterns of abuse continue for years. Silence is how 17 complaints get dismissed. Sarah refused to be silent, and that refusal changed everything. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell to watch more true stories like this. Thank you for watching. See you soon.